Welcome to Mick and the Psychic, where we leave no stone unturned as we explore all things outside the apparent physical realm.
There is no intent to teach or make you believe or disbelieve anything. It is just a safe space to listen and explore with us.
So for this next episode, you have permission to open your heart and mind as you join myself and Xavier on this deep dive into the unknown.
I started to see that if I put children into nature, how things would change for them. They would open up more, they'd be safer, they'd have a sense of belonging. I just started to peel back layers and I started realising that's not just our attachment to our primary caregivers or our family, it's our attachment to Mother Earth.
We have quite an interesting show today. I do think all our shows are interesting, but what makes this episode interesting is our wonderful guest, Rachel Findeis. She's a dance movement therapist, transpersonal counsellor that specialises in trans and intergenerational trauma, neglect, insecure attachment, and how this impacts on children today through their biological genes and cellular memory, but also, and what she says most importantly, the gifts, wisdom, and knowledge available to their transgenerational material and their cellular memory. So interesting. So Rachel also uses Wayapa Wurruk, I think I got that close to being right, practice, and that's based on a very ancient Australian indigenous wisdom. So this dance goes very deep, peoples, and I can't wait to hear more about it and dance with Rachel. Welcome to the show, Rachel.
Woo! Welcome, Rachel. Thank you for coming.
Thank you guys so much. That was an awesome introduction. I love hearing my own said back to me as well. No, I love it that you took that chunk from what I do. I love that that's what stood out to you from what I do. Yeah, that's such a huge aspect of it. I do specialize now. I used to work a lot in trauma. I've done many different things over the many years that I've been in this industry. 20 years, so showing my age now. Holy moly, time flies, but I look amazing, so it's okay. And that's the dance, people. Keep the dance alive.
Wonderful.
Well, before we start, I know you were just talking before that you have a bit of a unique welcome to acknowledgement of country. So I'd love to hear you start with that, if that's all right.
Absolutely. I would love to. Thank you so much, guys. So yes, I would like to do an acknowledgement to country. I would like to acknowledge whose traditional country I'm on today, the traditional custodians of the land that I'm on today. That is Wurundjeri country. But I want to extend that acknowledgement to the two of you, Michael and Xavier, and to all of our listeners and subscribers and whoever else it might be taking this moment right now with me as I connect in with the ancestors of this land who have helped shape it for over 120,000 years, the oldest living culture on the earth. My family's not from here. I'm firstborn generation. And so I need to acknowledge the fact that if it wasn't for the love and commitment and dedication and nurturing of the land they had given over all of that time, we would not have the opportunities that we have ourselves today. And the reciprocation between our original peoples and traditional custodians with every species, the animals, the birds, the fish, the marine life, the insects, all of these ancestors as well, all of these that were here first, to extend my gratitude to them and what they give us every day, unconditional love, to continue us. She can do without us, we can't do without her. Mm-hmm. And traditional custodians understood this and they loved this. So it's such a beautiful role model for us to learn from. And also on the back of Reconciliation Week and coming into Neuro Week and everything else, that is every single day though. It's not just that 1 week or that one day, recognizing that these steps are every single day. So doing an acknowledgement everywhere we can is an important part of this. But our elders from the past, our elders from the present, and our elders who are still emerging, sending them the love and ensuring that day by day we listen and learn to become the allies that we need to be, and also extending my respect to other First Nations people who may be listening and subscribing, as well as the First Nations people who are currently in my home, my children.
Beautiful. Thank you. I got so many goosebumps, and I actually quite felt a lot of emotion when you were saying that. So thank you for sharing. That felt really special.
Thank you.
Goodness. Okay. Yeah, so we loved your introduction and hearing all about the amazing things you do. I've known you for quite a few years now, I think. I'm not exactly sure when we met, but I've known you as the amazing belly dancer who I've had a couple of lessons from before, my mum's hens party. And before that, I brought my kids along to a beautiful school holiday workshop for a dance. I just thought you're such a fascinating person. And then I've been following you on social media and then started noticing all these other things you do and areas that you've gotten into and how you've grown and progressed over the years, which I think is just fantastic. So I really wanted to have you on the show. So thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to share. And I'm very grateful that you want to receive.
Of course, our listeners definitely will. So yeah.
So you've got a background, like you can go to Rachel's website to see the background, or you can just listen to this bit. You've got a background you've worked a lot in trauma, you've worked a lot with youth, a lot with family violence as well, is that right? Going from your background, you've been through a lot of different stages. Have you always used dance and movement in your practice with helping people, or have different modalities changed depending on, who you're working with and what you're working on?
It's always been, I think the best way for me to describe it is an embodiment practice. So especially things like trauma and family violence, when there's trauma of the body, the first step we need to take is recreating or reinitiating a healthy relationship with the physical body. We become disembodied when we experience trauma. That's a natural survival mechanism. It's not a choice. Our body is extremely intelligent, and it also stores the most memory, feelings, sensations. In the brain, our memories can become obscured with time and space, people, whatnot. The sensations and the feelings are stored within the body. So I would use any embodiment interventions, and usually ones that are very playful, artistic, creative. So everything I bring to a session, lots of props, lots of theatrical things, lots of fun. It's like a play school session. And so it's all and they all represent something: attachment, connection, mother, father, culture, identity, presence, communication. So they've all got a role to play, and the children are free to move within this, to learn to trust their own bodily cues again, to learn to attune to themselves again and what they want and need, and then kind of tell their story playfully through the props. By doing this, sometimes I will have memories pop up as I'll then be able to verbalize, but sometimes it's just very metaphorical. And that then still rewires a neuro pathway or heals a neuro pathway, which then changes their psychology, can override things. And so what I see within them moving through all their artistic endeavors is movement. So sometimes I might get them to do things that's deliberately moving in a certain way, because in dance therapy, there are sets of movements that will correlate to different things. But sometimes what you'll find, kids are amazing healers. They will be able to, I see a lot of the time, when you go in there with that intention that that's what you want for them, that's your love for them, they'll naturally then get drawn towards something that'll get them to move in that way. Now, different dance therapists will work different ways. Other dance therapists will be more, I suppose, prescribe and say, I'll get them to move that way and I'll do it a different way. For me, the way that it's worked out is that the children, whoever has found me, they've needed that autonomy, that self-determination to choose their own pathway, and the movements then just organically come, because the body is always seeking to heal. It's always seeking to heal. So when we give it that time and space and that belief and that trust, when we have that for the other, they'll gain that for themselves and they'll be able to supply it for themselves. And then that way, they're not relying on me forever and ever.
That's right. I have the same thought for clients that come and see me. So they're totally different things. I'm not working with the body, I'm working with their higher self, but we don't call ourselves a healer. We're holding space for them. So that's what I was just connecting with then, is that you're giving them that safe space to do that. So you're holding the intention, which means you're creating the space and some knowledge and teachings to get them to be able to feel comfortable and use their own intuition and feelings to find the right movements. That's beautiful.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You've got to see them as their own healers as well. And
yeah,
they're holding space. That's right.
It takes a lot of confidence in the practitioner to trust that. And I think you find that in any kind of healing modality, and it's a good way to start. They'll go by the book and they'll structure how this is how it works. This is how it happens. Do this, do that. If that happens, do that, do that. And then you see people that have, it's kind of something that twigs in what they do, where they actually understand what's happening now. And they don't have to think about what they need to do. They can just stop and see what needs to be done. And that sounds like exactly what you're doing with that movement, embodiment. It's like, okay, I need to see what's happening here to allow that to happen. And there's still, you understand that it's not just movement. This is a way to subtly get to a point without directly going straight to it and bring it out in their own way. That's pretty impressive.
It is very intuitive, and we get trained to be able to attune to the others, because that's the attachment. We've got to have actually an attachment relationship. I've got to take on that caregiver role, which is different from a lot of other modalities. And you're right, we have to be able to, we get told over again, trust the process, remain curious, be in the moment. Lots of different, we had so many different quotes that we were told over and over again, but it's right. I've got to feel that whatever's coming up, so transference, whatever is happening in my body is actually your body. So I've got to be embodied, and whatever's coming up, I've got to trust that that's happening with you. And then children feel that trust, and then they know that they can trust themselves as well to be able to be whatever they need to be in that moment.
And I know
I was a youth for 11 years. Oh, sorry.
There's an overlap.
Sorry.
That's okay. You go.
You go.
Because I was sort of changing the topic a little bit. So if you want to go.
Oh, okay. I was just saying I was a youth worker for 11 years, and one of the biggest things I learned was young people and children are the greatest bullshit detectors on the planet. And if you are not presenting yourself as honestly as possible or working earnestly, they'll pick it and they'll shut everything down, and you can't get through any layers. So how important to do this work where you're making yourself vulnerable to have that attachment and transference. Like, that's so important, particularly with young people and children.
Yeah, I agree. It's all got to be the heart. If I think it's just, and there's no judgment on people that, they're all about the mind, and that will suit some, but I agree. I think children, they need heart, especially if it's coming from trauma. It's the heart. The heart heals. The heart heals the heart. That's
exactly
that difference there. Yeah.
Change directions, Opti. You're right. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, so speaking of that, because helping children with trauma, I would assume that you've been through some kind of trauma yourself that you've had to heal to be able to understand others and be able to help them the most. And I know from your website, and I think it was mentioned in the intro, about you being, was it neurodiverse or neurodivergent? I always get the wording mixed up. Yep, both. Or other, I'm used to the terms like on the spectrum or something like that. So, and so because that's also you, and you're able to really connect with other people and children on the spectrum as well, Is that what started you because you were going through your own healing and trying to figure out stuff yourself and in your own body? And then, like, how did you start? How did you figure out that dance moving was healing for you?
Yeah, empathetic resonance is everything. Mirror neurons is everything. And I think that's that bullshit detector you were talking about. Absolutely have had to work through a lot of my trauma. And, you know, trauma comes in layers, and accepting those layers, especially when it's early childhood trauma or infancy trauma, which is mine. And so that is the deepest, and accepting that being part of your journey and turning that into your alchemy. You know, being on your own journey feeds your practice, it feeds your compassion, it feeds your empathy, it feeds your patience, it feeds your holding space, it feeds your acceptance and tolerance. Don't get me wrong, people still piss me off and I still have boundaries. And I think that's the biggest thing being through trauma, is having to learn about boundaries again. And so, yeah, so definitely fed my practice 110%. I remember when I was doing my placements and I wanted to do a placement with someone who was working with trauma, and I couldn't because everyone was saying that, no, you know, the clientele is too vulnerable because of the trauma. And I had to sit back and I went, hang on, me. I'm my placement. I will be the greatest placement, you know, and my journey that I could possibly give a child. So I think that level of attunement and love most definitely feeds my practice. Yes. And yes, I do identify as neurodiverse, neurodivergent, and that double empathy is a huge factor. So I find that, you know, I do have a lot of children that just kind of find, or families who find me, groups who find me that who are neurodiverse, neurodivergent, and the understanding and the attunement for each other is, I think, deepens the relationship and deepens their ability to connect with themselves and have a stronger identity and see themselves in a different perspective than what a lot of current mainstream belief systems might, which is everything to me. Because masking is huge. When you grow up neurodiverse, neurodivergent, and I think there's a lot of people around my age who would say the same thing, and you've masked most of your life in order to get through different systems, especially education, social expectations, communities, families, whatever, that's traumatic. And there's a lot of grief to heal from that too. So then my target would be to not let children have to feel that they have to mask.
Yeah, that's amazing. I find it's very interesting. I don't always bring it back to my practice, but maybe that's because what I know.
We can relate.
So I probably work downstream to you. So I work with a lot of adults and work with a lot of childhood trauma as adults using hypnotherapy, using hypnosis. And it's very interesting, the things that you're saying there in how to express a lot of how they are able to identify and work through some of this trauma is through the body as well. It's sometimes through stories, sometimes it's through a whole lot of different stuff. And I'd love to talk about transgenerational stuff, as I do ancestral lives, you know, and how that, you know, there's so much correlation between the trauma that, particularly in women and violence and domestic violence, aunties and grandmothers and mothers, and how there's some of that feeds into their own, almost like it's passed down somehow. But in working downstream, I find that a lot of stuff comes through the body as well and is held in certain parts of the body. And in working with that, I even need to be gentle in working with that as well. So even if you find something with the body, there's certain ways of being able to work through some healing in that, in a altered state of consciousness. But even just like if it's something around the heart, sometimes people can't even hold their heart, can't even put their hands over their heart. So they might need a pillow or something, or they might need to imagine holding their heart you know, with their mind's eye or something else. It's amazing what you're saying is exactly what I'm seeing downstream as they're going back to work through their trauma as a child. And it's such important work to help the children today as well, so they don't become, you know, my clients later or people like me working later on, because it's a long time of wearing masks and holding it back, or even that disembodiment. It's a great thing. It's a coping mechanism, and it's great that we have it. But there comes a point where, you know, that no longer serves you. So if you can do that with the children, then they're not going to go through a big chunk of their life where, you are masking. That's incredible.
I see a lot of children, you know, I was really lucky to learn about transgenerational trauma when I was working at an Aboriginal spiritual healing centre. It was substance abuse, mental health. They had men's groups, women's groups. It was at the Middle Jarkle Centre. It was called Maya. I won't say who ran it because they're both deceased now, so just families. But I was really lucky. This was when transgenerational trauma was just starting to sort of pop up. This would have been almost 20 years ago, so pretty earlier on when I got into all of this. Because there were 2 psychiatrists that were working with the grandchildren of the Vietnam War veterans. And they started to see this trend that, you know, yes, the Vietnam War veterans, you know, obviously healing them, it was massive, massive. But then they will be talking about what their grandchildren were going through. So not their children, their grandchildren. And so we now know that, and, you know, neuroscience has proven that it skips a generation. So we will carry on our grandparents, our great-great-grandparents, our great-great-great-grandparents. And so these lineages, and it's stored, it can't be cognitive memory. It's literally stored in your fibers, liver, heart, kidney, you know, all these different, a shoulder muscle, like it could be your bones. It's purely physical. Therefore, the only way to form a relationship with it and provide it a way of communicating itself is through embodiment interventions, and very slow and subtle. And so that's, I found an embodiment practice for young children really positive, and the things that they're exploring, I know straight away, I'm like, that's transgenerational. Like there's no, it's all very metaphorical, and it's just, it's too deep, and I literally feel it in my body as well. And so it's so important. But I'm wondering if you find the same thing. I find that once we are exploring that, I don't know about adults, but I see if the children, that's why I'm so passionate about this area of it, is in the transgenerational memory of their gifts and their wisdom in this higher intelligence from these ancestral lineages as well. They're bringing in these old ways, and it's just like, whoa, yeah, go kids.
That's wonderful. I find that, so in how I work, that will often come through in different ways. And so if there's some kind of significant emotional event, so it's really dealing with specifically the trauma, a significant emotional event in an ancestral life, then what will come through is what that significant emotional event is, and they'll experience in a trance form as if it's happening to themselves. And that might be the whole body. It might just be a body part moving, or normally it's something that they feel and see as if it's a very vivid dream. To release that or understand that. But then there's other forms where they might be visited by someone that's passed, or they might get some information somewhere else, and that will be shared, but often not at the same time as releasing the trauma, but definitely connected. So that happens. And when that happens, I think, oh my gosh, that's incredible. But for that to happen for the children as well, and working through the trauma through what you're doing with that embodiment, I think is incredible. I think it's the same thing. What do we say? Same shit, different bucket. That's what it feels like. It's just we're working with something that's beyond us, that's happening. That's just happening in a very different way. But interesting how you say subtle as well. So everything that happens with that, it's like really working on a very, very subtle level. And subtle doesn't mean small.
Yeah, no.
It's subtle is something where, you know, the gross is what you see, touch, feel, and what's happening, including time. The subtle is something that's beyond or behind, maybe behind that. I don't know. So your use of gentle and subtle, I think, is so powerful and so true, but not to be misconstrued with small and little, or not very powerful. Insignificant. Yeah, that's right. It's obviously very, very powerful.
Big stuff.
Very powerful. It's very deep. It's very
deep.
much, because it's not all cognitive. And so you think about, you know, the depths of the soul, the depths of the body, how deep something can be if it's, how do I explain it? The sensation will come through, and you think about a trickle of blood in a muscle mixed in with how much more is in there. So even though that might look minute, it's playing such a huge role in what's pumping throughout the body, but it's most definitely still a part of the whole system. And so everything that's also laid on top of that, and so to get to that, how much of a journey that is to get to that drop.
Yeah,
makes sense. We get it.
I love it. It's really hard. Yeah, exactly. We're trying to explain something you're talking about it being beyond cognitive, right? So what we're trying to do is bring in something as close as possible to the truth of something that's beyond the intellectual. And so it's clumsy. But if it's hard to really pull together, then you're probably on the right track.
I'm finding all of this so fascinating, because I don't work with body at all with me, like with my clients. And I work with children too, and helping with, I call it generational trauma, because I don't know the language around it, but I'm helping with the spiritual self. And so I'm just like, we all attract clients who need different things in different ways. So yeah, you guys will attract clients that need the healing that way. And I just kind of connect with people, and if there's stuff in generations, I've noticed I might just clear it in past lives or their own current life in their childhood. But then sometimes I do pick up and I get shown that it's been passed on through their family, and sometimes they're the same soul as a relative in their family tree. It's the same soul coming back. And so the repeating patterns in that family line, which I believe could be linked to some of this body stuff and the muscle memory and all that, because they're bringing it through that way. So there could be some similarities there. So I'm just like, this is so interesting, because I don't know enough about it. I just love how people will go through and they find the kind of right. We have said this, I reckon we say this every second podcast, but people go to what the modality that they're drawn to, the practitioner that they need at the time in that life, depending on how they need to heal and release stuff. Even with the past lives, we have two completely different styles, Michael and I, but yeah, people just go, some people need to feel and experience it themselves. Others just need someone to wave a magic wand like I do and do it for them. And some people need physical movement and healing to shift it from their physical self, because that's how they need it to be done for them. It's just so interesting.
It's earth, mind, body, spirit. It's, you know, people, it'll be exemplified in different parts of that. You know, it'll be in their earthly surroundings, and she is included in all of this, by the way, because now I'm going to throw a spanner in there and just go, what about the transgenerational memory that we're picking up from Mother Earth? Like, now you spoke about before we started recording, and I think about going to particular places in Australia, and I couldn't agree more. You know, you got to know where you are, and if you don't know where you are, and the memories that are held in particular places on the earth, and even in the empathetic resonance of your surroundings, then you're dealing with a whole nother level of, and that's where the spirituality comes through, though, Xavier. You know, that's all there too. So it's that earth, mind, body, spirit that we are all experiencing. Some are just recognizing it more than others, if that makes sense.
It does. So like when we're talking before we pushed record, which often happens so much, but but one thing I was talking about was kind of where I am, which is in near South Melbourne, right? And at South Melbourne, there's Emerald Hill is like what the settlers called it. and there's a big town hall there. And I was always drawn to the town hall, and there's beautiful buildings around it, but I was always drawn to it. And then I found out later on in reading about the peoples and how they used to use this land. There was like, there's so much foraging and hunting was really easy. So they're very spiritual around here, because you could do 4 or 5 hours of foraging. You've got enough food for your family. So what do you do with the rest of the time? So there's a lot of spiritual development here. It wasn't as hard living here. So they do a lot of spiritual development here. And we're talking not over 5 years. As you said, it's like 120,000 years. So you can imagine how much energy is in the land. And this Emerald Hill is a really, really important place where they had a whole lot of different ceremonies. And this comes from settlers here that witnessed it and had drawings of it and everything as well. So it's obviously really important. Ones where they even said it was spine tingling to watch, and they didn't know what they were looking at. And now there's a big ass town hall from the 19th century built on it. And there's a whole lot of energies. There's a lot of people with a lot of mental health and homelessness. So obviously that's there, but there feels like this energy of kind of weird energy in the area. And it's probably, it could have something to do with the land, but I'm not psychic. So Xavier can walk into a place. No, it's true.
No. Yeah,
okay,
sure.
I'm not practicing psychic, whatever. But Xavier can walk into a place with her superpowers and have a feeling about an area or know something or just have information. For someone like me that can't walk into a place, you need to kind of read up about it. There's an old business term that we used to use. It's so true. And it's, if you don't know who's being screwed, it's probably you. That's what it's like. Where it's not just the people that you're around, it is the land that you're on as well, and the history, and you're talking thousands and thousands of years of history there. If something's not vibing or something's not working, maybe you should work out where you are as well, and what energies are in that area and in that land, and does it make sense as to what you're doing there on that land is going to be positive or negative. So we do need to find out like where we are and what we're on, not just for respect, but just to get like where you're at in the tree as well.
I'm going to do that. Slack. I should have done that already, so I'm going to do that.
Yeah. There you go. That's homework for
great.
lots of people, including Xavier. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'm a bit slack, so I'm embarrassed that I haven't done that, but in a good way, because I need to educate myself and I would love to know. So I'm really curious to look into my area of Calcalo. If anybody knows any information, you can tell me before I go do my own Googling.
It's about that harmony, you know, living in harmony with our environment. And I think that that really contributes to our well-being. You know, that's what got me into Way Up. But after being a therapist for so long and focusing so much on attachment, and I started to see that if I took children into nature, how things would change for them. They would open up more, they'd be safer, they'd have a sense of belonging. It just, things would just seem to be easier for them. And so I just started to peel back layers, and I started realizing that's not just our attachment to our primary caregivers or our family, it's our attachment to Mother Earth. And I really feel like there is a mass sense of grief for many of us in terms of our detachment from our heritages, our identities, our cultures, our languages, our practices, our rituals that added to who and what we are. And I feel like that's part of our transgenerational trauma, whether you had, of course, a traumatic event, but, and you guys would know from your own training, feeling neglected or abandoned or rejected in the body, that feels volatile, that feels traumatizing. And I think for so many of us, we've gotten so used to being so detached, but we're not recognizing that might actually be part of the trauma or the anxiety or the whatever that we're feeling, is that disharmony from nature, from our connection to our first mother.
Can you talk a little bit more about this practice then? Like,
yes.
What is it? Is it a modality? Is it just a way of working with people?
So I should introduce it firstly. Waiapa work means connect to earth in the Gunai Konai and Mara language here in Victoria. and its founders and co-founders are Jamie Thomas, who is a traditional custodian for Gunai people, and Sarah Walsh, who is Canadian, Sarah Jones, who is Canadian and Welsh background.
Mm-hmm.
So that is their program that they created back in 1990. No, I'll have to get back to you about that. Anyway, it is a movement modality as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's a program that is designed it's a First Nations lens into what it is to be holistically well. So and our interconnectedness with all species of Mother Earth, understanding that we are part of these cycles, we are part of this creation, and how to live within this harmony and this creation rhythm and flow of life, and understanding that what we do to her, we do to ourselves, and vice versa. And also understand the importance of our own identity and our own culture. So I found it really beautiful in actually healing a lot of what I thought was loss of identity or loss of culture. And I also found it really harmonizing and strengthening with standing strong in what my First Nations heritage is, and not feeling like there's an imposter syndrome, and trusting in my cellular memory. And we do, with the movement practice, it is the 14 elements from here in Australia, and it just deepens the connection with all aspects of Mother Nature here in Australia. It provides us a sense of belonging and identity and safety in being here, and what it means to be here in Australia. Simultaneously to then recognise, well, who am I as well? What is my own culture? What is my own identity? What is my own sense of self on this earth? And so by doing all of this, it just makes us more mindful of not only our own wellness and our own role on this earth, it makes us more aware of this reciprocation that we share with every living species, in order to promote the fact that we will have a planet for our future generations. It changes our perspective of and ways of being and thinking and living on this planet.
So important. It's funny, you said it earlier, it's something that I say to people all the time when they go, with the environment and we're going to kill this planet. And I'm like, no, we're not. We're going to kill us. The planet will be fine. It'll take maybe 500 years. And we're just making the planet unlivable for us until it keeps going. We're not even a blip in the radar. The billions of years old it is. It'll be fine.
It'll most definitely be fine. I think, the most thing, right, that the best way that we can look at it is just for the pure fact of respecting her and respecting and appreciating and just remembering and recognizing every single day what we're given, just because she loves us, just because she does actually allow us to keep on living. She could really end it all in the blink of an eyelid if she really wanted to. We see snippets of that. She always seeks to harmonize herself, and I know earthquakes and tidal waves, they're horrendous, and I won't take anything away from anyone who's ever been through one of those natural disasters, and my heart goes out to them. I can't imagine what that's like. What we've got to recognize, though, is that's her way of trying to actually bring harmony back to herself again.
Bigger picture.
Yeah.
That's hard for people to understand sometimes.
It's so hard, and I think what Wayapa tries to do is help us recognize that we're custodians as well, so feeling empowered in our role here on earth. And so for me, I work predominantly with children in Wayapa. I think I've done one adult workshop, and the reason why I do that is because I want children to feel empowered, because it can feel so disempowering if you listen to the news or you listen to the facts. It can feel hopeless, and if you turn on the television and have a look at everything that's happening in the world, we can most definitely feel that it's hopeless and that we don't play a role at all. I feel like Wayapa sort of provides this this platform to have children understand themselves on this planet and the vital role that they do play, and the relationship that they do have with their planet, despite what may be on display.
Yeah, I'm getting that the basis of this is not so much keep the planet around as a future for the humans, but more have some empathy for the land that we're on. You know, that the land's a living thing, you're a living thing. You know, have some empathy for the land because she's looking after you. Like, how are you showing love back? It's almost like an empathy for the land as a being, rather than as our right to be here and we own this piece.
We do not own this piece.
And, you know, science has proven the Indigenous perspective. So we are nature. We're not just a part of it. We're not part of it. And we share like a huge percentage of our DNA with trees.
That's the other part of our lungs. Our respiratory system isn't just our lungs. It's also the trees. That's part of our respiratory system.
Yeah. Our DNA has marine life. It has animal life. We are literally made of stardust.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? So when you start yourself in that perspective, all of a sudden you're like, I'm amazing.
Yeah.
It really helps you. Like, you know, you're special too, and that you're with this, like, yeah, man, that's my tree. Well, you know, how would I take care of my own body? How would I take care of the tree? We start seeing this correlation between ourselves. And once again, I feel like that disconnection can be such a sever to such a deep, primal, innate part of ourselves that we're not recognizing that that's what it is anymore. Our practices, our rituals, our ways of thinking used to keep us like in that stance, used to keep us well, therefore kept the planet well. And I think that sever has caused both to become sick. We're kind of like mirroring each other in that sense.
Yeah. It's interesting. Any kind of message from the spirit world that comes through when someone's in trance that I've experienced, when there's particular practice that people need to do, they talk about meditation, but they're always instructed to be more grounded.
Yeah. Yes.
And this is what we're talking about. Like, it's not literally don't like spike your feet to the earth. It's just understand that as grounding yourself to the earth. That's a metaphoric way of doing it in your mind's eye. Lots of different ways of doing it, you know, whether you have like imagine a tree root down to the central core of the earth or whatever. Like, there's so many different ways of doing it. And it's kind of like the dance. It's kind of like a movement thing. It's a dance thing. It's something that's metaphoric of something that's really happening. It's that connecting and understanding that, you know, we are dirt. And when this life ends, this body is on loan. It goes back. It's free, but it goes back paid in full. You're still part of the earth. It still goes back, you know.
I wonder if the stardust part, like, you know, just sprinkles back up into.
Yeah. Because it rains, and then
yes, of course.
And then that dissipates back up, and then we come back as rain. So we actually keep on recycling.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, I'll have to ask Neil deGrasse Tyson. I don't know 100% if anything escapes or comes. I don't get it, but absolutely. I mean, like when you look at it, we just become part of this. We are still part of this. We just have a little bit of consciousness that's captured this body, which is great, but we're still part of something much bigger. Clearly.
That's just reminded me of something. When I first started working with children myself, because back when I first started doing this, I was doing children's workshops and teaching them meditation. And I sort of channeled a meditation and a way for children to send their frustrations and anything that's bothering them into the earth. And we used to like draw a square on the ground and they put everything in there, then they put a lid on it and stomp on it and get it out of themselves physically. So it was like a type of physical movement to get it out of their body, because some people can't just sit and meditate and send it off. This was a physical way to stomp it into the ground. But then I got asked to we send it down to the center of the earth, and Mother Earth will transmute it into love to heal the planet.
Wow.
And I still say that. I still tell people, so when you release your stuff and you send it to the earth, you're not damaging her. She's happy to transmute it into love to send to the animals or the flowers or something like that. So she's always working for us. And so you're doing a service to others by releasing your stuff and sending it there, because it will be transmuted. How, like, wow, that's really resonates with what you've been talking about.
Xavier, I resonate with that so much. The way upper elements to help with emotional regulation, especially with neurodiverse and neurodivergent children and people. We have different self-regulation and grounding than others. And I find we call it eco-regulation in Wayapa. That's a Wayapa term.
Beautiful.
Because so we have the earth element, and that's the volcano. But we know that after the volcano, a beautiful new landscape is never created anywhere on this planet unless a volcano occurs.
Oh.
New planets and stars aren't formed without an explosion of some sort.
Yeah.
When a mother tree is when she falls and dies in a forest, she keeps on releasing all of her nutrients.
Yes.
I mean, that from destruction, Mother Earth actually, and my spiritual beliefs, I've gone into a lot of shamanism with a transpersonal counselor. We know that there actually has to be that to make the magic, there has to be that explosion, that fear, that darkness.
Yeah.
And you're right. That is how it's how we create alchemy. It's that grinding down, and that, oh my God. And that's when something even more beautiful and more profound is created, and something more aligned. So what you just said, love. I mean, that's our ultimate alignment. And that's not, the darkness isn't there, though. It can be. And when we have that connection with all else, we have that eco-regulation that produces love for all living things. All of a sudden, the ego doesn't belong.
Beautiful.
Interesting how, like, if you're lucky enough to have a relationship with your mother and you are injured or you fall over, you go to mum for a hug and a kiss and everything feels better. It feels like this is the metaphor for that with coming back to the earth. It's like you're just going back to mum for a hug and a kiss and everything's better.
Yeah.
100%. That's exactly how I felt when I did Wayapa. 100%. You if you do have any of your own attachment things, it is about reattaching yourself to a mother, and there is so much healing in it. There's so much strengthening in it. There's so much empowerment.
So how can this movement therapy help neurodiverse and neurodivergent children specifically? Like, why is it important for them to move to release and heal?
Oh,
I love the smile on your face. You love that question. We did not rehearse that question.
No, we did not, but that's why I breathe. That question is why I breathe.
Wow.
Good.
And what makes me think that whenever I do one of these I actually even said to one of the amazing Wayapa ladies who created the education program, I'm like, I can't believe I get paid for this.
Gorgeous.
It's so beautiful. It's when I started doing Wayapa work for early years, I did like I said, mostly early years, and I was coming across, and I already knew that neurodiverse and neurodivergent children were so connected to Mother Earth and their spirituality. They often talk about this higher dimension that they're a part of. They talk about these waters that live beneath the earth that, you guys can break down the metaphors for that, and so can anyone else who's listening. So I already knew it was there. But then when I started doing Wayapa work, and there'll be neurodiverse, neurodivergent children in the sessions, just there, it provides this beautiful platform and this beautiful space for them just to purely be themselves and speak their own language and know that they're going to be understood. And it's a world that is just us. neurodiversity, neurodivergence, I know everyone's connected to the cellular memory, but times it by 1,000,000. And then you've got neurodiversity, neurodivergence. And that's where the communication breakdowns can occur, because neurodivergence, I'm just going to say ND, is such an ancient way. It's such an ancient way of communicating. It's such an ancient way of being. I feel like it's like this lost art form. It's like discovering a lost city. And when you see it, it's like, oh, all of a sudden it makes sense again, but so many people have forgotten how to live in it. And I feel like our children have this deep connection with Wayapa because it does speak their language. It's a platform for them to be able to communicate their intelligence, their skills, their knowledge, their awareness. So I just see them relish this program, and they just have so much to offer. Like at the end of a session when children are suggesting things, the things they say you cannot make up. Like,
give us an example. Like,
I should be writing. Oh, okay. Down a diary of this stuff, but one from last week, I think it was. One little boy, he just came up to me randomly, and he's like, he's 4 or 3, by the way. I had a dream, and in my dream, a snake came up to me and started talking to me and telling me, yeah, right, because we know what the snake means.
Yeah.
That earth wisdom, and started telling me that if we don't start looking after the animals, then we can't look after the people. Yeah, I know. And then this
so
little
tuned in
as well, and then another little mate said something, and so I just had this little group of sharks.
kids are so cool.
PCs completely, yeah, and yet their knowledge of the earth was just their connection and their trust in it. And I think Wayapa strengthens their trust in their knowledge, their trust in their skills, their trust in, they're so intuitive. They don't just go off what's happening here. They go off what's happening here and here. And that's what it is. Wayapa is being in all your muscles, being in all your fibers, feeling Mother Earth flow through that, and then working from that space, because then that's not industrial, that's not colonization, that is aligned with the planet, and that is what the planet needs more now than ever. So I see it as providing neurodiverse, neurodivergent children opportunities in environmentalism or spirituality or being leaders in how to connect with the earth, because despite them sometimes speaking so poetically and so anciently, it's up to the rest of the world to be patient and for everyone else to learn those languages again, to get out of here so much and what it could mean and dissect it and diagnose it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a massive kudos to the parents of these children that are listening to their intuition and listening to their children and taking them to see people like you to bring it out of them, and so they can be healed and heard, because it's another reason why I love working with children, because a lot of them get forgotten about, or the troubles aren't taken as seriously because they're just kids. There's stuff that can be shifted to help. So I love to explain it as being they're going to grow up to well-adjusted adults rather than adults that have things to heal, which is what you're saying is what you're so passionate about. But like, well done to the parents for paying attention and for taking them to modalities like yours so they can be their best selves. And they can have people to hear all this stuff that they're channeling and taking it seriously, instead of, so much of us, and I've been guilty of it before I knew any of this stuff. So it's your imagination, honey. Like, well, that's an interesting dream, and not thinking anything of it.
Yeah.
We had a couple of years ago, we had Cress Spicer.
You would love that episode.
Do you remember Cress?
Yeah, of course.
And do you know Cress?
No, I said she'd love the episode.
Oh, she'd love it. Oh, sorry. I thought you said no. Oh my gosh. So a good one for listeners to go to as well, which is episode, I was looking it up and I've forgotten, episode 19. You'll find it on Mick and the Psychic podcast. And she works with ND kids as well in
She's
Canada. Is she
spicy
in Canada?
too.
Canada?
It was Canada. It was the US at least, but
US maybe,
Yeah.
yeah. Our partner was from Canada. And so she was saying, it's amazing what you're saying. So she was saying that, and she kind of showed in a way, she said, these kids are up here. So she's pointing above her head, and
Yes.
that's where they reside. And what happens when she works with them is she just brings that down to here.
Yep.
And so that's like to the heart. She's talking about, she even talked about grounding and how grounding was so important so that they could have their language. And she was saying how much more spiritually connected they were because they're above that intellect. So they're above the intellect, and this is a way of pulling them back down to be able to communicate that. And that where we don't understand, where we're on an intellectual.
Yeah, and they get diagnosed all this stuff just because they're up here and they're on the same wavelength as the average person. And so we don't get it.
So it's amazing that you are coming from a completely different place, doing completely different work with the same
thing. Yeah,
children and connecting exactly the same dots, going, they're up here, it's bringing them down here. And then that holding that space for the language. And then you go, I feel like I'm speaking to an elder now.
Yeah.
You know, like that. And you are. And we are. That's it. And so it's very important to show that respect as if you are speaking to an elder. I find in hypnosis, when I'm working with people in trance, very respectful for anything that comes through, because often it's something that's been around for a very long time. And I'm potentially talking to elders from different parts and maybe even different planets, who knows. And we just have to be able to treat this kind of wisdom that comes as if you're speaking to an elder that's in front of you physically. And I think we throw it away because we can't see it physically. We think, oh, it's just some kid talking. It's like, no, just listen and show respect, because this wisdom is something that's imparted for you. And when we're talking about the land, we're talking about that's the wisdom from the land as a being as well. So it's interesting, that connection to bring down, that grounding is, coming back to mum. There's so many different things. It makes a lot of sense, and I think resonates with a whole lot of people working in very, very different ways.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be much, even science, there doesn't seem to be any real issue with what's going on. That seems to be on the same page.
Yeah.
It's they're unifying. I see them unifying these different parts and these different worlds, very different worlds. And I see them as more and more lately, and even sitting with myself and constantly unraveling, as you do when you have to unravel, when you're being all you have to unravel. And in that, shed so many different lights, and then children teach me and being open to that. They're a compass. I feel like they're this compass back to a very ancient way of being, and I feel like that is like a bridge that we really need right now, because we need to start remembering these old ways of living in harmony with our planet in order to respect her more, if we are to want to remain living on a planet. I do feel like there's a lot of leaders with our children, and I think it's because, yes, like you said, there is this higher dimensional, and some of the kids I work with are actually really knowledgeable of that, and I think that there can be a lot of frustration for them when that doesn't get acknowledged, when that doesn't get valued, when there's not space for them to explore that. And even in movement, we talk about how kids need to now, information processing is different, and sometimes kids have to move more and they learn differently and they hear differently in their own times. And that's why, and I think, Xavier, this will probably tap into you as well a lot. They're having to, the hypersensitivities that we have is because we're listening with all parts of ourselves, and one of those is spiritual. So we're taking in information in so many different ways, which means we're actually seeing it from a higher intelligence level, because there's also a spiritual aspect to it as well as anything else, which means that then what they reproduce with that information is going to be very much aligned with how we should be as human beings who are nature, not a part of nature, nature.
So true. Very true.
Yeah.
So with people, what kind of people, I guess, are accessing your services, and how do they access it? Is it only local? Do you work with people online as well? Like, how else do you work with people, I guess, on a broader level?
With the Way Up Work sessions, if you are a centre, if you are a school, an organisation, a kindergarten, things like that, you can usually go online and look up and book through the Way Up Work educational website.
Yep.
Which is the Way Up website. And what will happen there then is, depending on where you're located, we obviously have allocated practitioners. Yeah, that's to you. If you would like my practice, like a one-on-one, yes, you're able to access me as an individual, or conveniently fall within my catchment area. I have one little girl. I'm a dance movement therapist, and she is neurodiverse. She's not autistic, so her mum brought me in to have that, because she is so nature-based. She's amazing. So very much with a Way Up paradigm, but still as a dance movement therapist. So you can kind of access me in that way as well. So I do a lot of outreach. I don't work from home. I don't have my own centre. That's just the way life worked out for me. I found that when I did have my own studio, my children, because especially neurodiverse and neurodivergent children, sometimes they feel more comfortable in their own homes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just found that my practice just worked out that way. So I ditched the studio, and now I'm like Ludmobile. I come to you.
And you can get access through NDIS too. So I think I saw.
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Yes, I have my NDIS screen check. So yes, I work children's check.
So if I've got a child on the spectrum, and he's the kind of kid that he's not loving high school, all the classes are boring, he doesn't see the point in them, and he gets fidgety and likes to move around and stuff. So is that the kind of kid who might like your class, like, or either where would he fit in? Like, out of curiosity to see what he needs. Like, is that something, or those are kids that are just nature based? Like he'd rather be on a screen.
Yeah, I mean, look, the way my son loves being on a screen too, in his First Nations, he grew up nature-based. And I think for a lot of my kids, you know, the screen time stuff is because that's them getting to be in control of a world.
Yes.
World does not reflect who and what they are congruently. They go outside, and if your child is on the spectrum, if he's neurodivergent, the electricity in his body, you know, the good old lightning element, that electricity in his body that we usually have more of than other people, is going to be tapping into his surroundings more than others. So things do not feel congruent. If there's not enough spaces in the world that will understand how he wants to move the way he wants to move, then it makes sense that he can go into a game and move the way that he wants to move in his time and do the creative.
Everything else and just hyper focus.
Us to change the rest of the world. We don't change the child, we change the world. And that's, I stick hard to that. I advocate you see the stuff that I have. I'm very staunch on that. Child is the world, and not even just, it can't just be on the family either, because, you know, I really emphasize with that, you know, some of our systems at the moment, no, they don't serve the hunter-gatherer in our children. And, you know, I see my son in his game, he's a hunter. And I get it. I don't want you sitting down in front of a screen all day. I wish I could give you your hunting grounds, but he's stolen generation. You know, his family walked down here from Cherbourg Mission up in Queensland. And so I emphasize, And I think a lot of families would say that somewhere in their history there might have been, that really harsh sever as well. And I think a lot of kids are being born remembering these things, and that's why I go out and I advocate the way that I do for our systems and environmental change, like doing things like Wayapa, so that children can have their planet back the way that it should be.
Fantastic.
This is not ours, it's theirs.
Yeah, I think a lot of people seem to forget that, like, because they're not worrying about the future because they won't be here. You know, so I hear that from this, like, but then it's our children, but they're like, I don't have kids, whatever. Like,
But you will be back. You just might be eternal, or you know. So,
they don't think about it. They're just very
people.
much in the moment and care about themselves, you know, like lots of people. It's beautiful. The more people that are changing that and getting people thinking, you know, there's so much more. And I believe in past lives and future lives. So yeah, you're definitely coming back. Like if you stuffed up this time, you're going to come back multiple times till you get it right. So until you've maybe figured out the earth stuff and love her and respect her properly, you're going to keep coming back here.
Well, either way, like if even take out the spiritual beliefs or any understanding you may have, technically we've talked about the fact that when you die, you go back to the earth.
Yes.
Even eventually, even though we put ourselves in these like plastic boxes under the ground, so it takes longer. But it's like, eventually we're going to be back to the earth, and we are the earth again. So even if you had no spiritual belief at all, you are going to be the earth. You are the earth now, but you are going to be the earth again, just not as a human. So either way, you kind of committed forever. You just believe you're not committed right now forever.
Yeah.
Reconnect now nicely or reconnect later badly. Okay, you choose.
Yeah.
Or do it consciously or unconsciously. Forget nicely or not nicely. It's happening. Sorry, like there's no, you don't get to take this bit with you. You don't die and then take it with you. It goes back. It's still there. You're still there. So,
Something to Xavier as well. What you just spoke about. Sorry to chop back again. I don't mean to take you.
Chop it up.
Yeah, no. The being bored at school, and I think that comes what we were talking about before about that higher intelligence. It just that I think our kids, especially neurodivergent children, are seeing that, but this isn't aligned. It's not aligned.
Totally agree with you. School sucks.
It's industry.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah,
it's not aligned here, and so they just go, no, I need something more meaningful. That feeds and even if they're not realizing it yet, but feeds a deeper part of themselves than what they're consciously or unconsciously aware of, and that is that higher form of intelligence.
Not everyone gets into a box, and then in school system for so many people is a box because they don't work like that. It might work for some, but it doesn't work for everybody. And so I really applaud the families, and my brother and his wife are one of them that are doing child-led learning and letting their kids learn in their own way and style because that suits them. And it's better for them. And so, but everyone's different, and it must be so frustrating. I know, I was frustrated, so we could get so fidgety and you lose concentration, daydream. It's not because you're naughty. You're not a good person. It's just because it doesn't make sense to you, or you don't. For them, like, I know for him, he just like, I don't see why I need to learn a language. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm never going to use it. It's just not practical. So he just goes his own little, like, he doesn't see the point of it. And I'm like, I totally get it, mate. I don't think you should have to do a language either. Have a choice in the school when you do, when you have a segregated family from divorce and stuff, you can't always control exactly the kind of schooling. So you'd make do with what kind of stuff.
Our society needs to be more family-centered, which is nature-centered. That's when it will start. Which is our First Nations of Australia's people's way of being.
Yes.
That it's that living and by the way, Wayapa is also about remembering that we are all First Nations from somewhere eventually, right? And so tapping that and allowing yourself to remember that and living by that, trusting. I think that biggest thing, again, trusting that. You know, even if you can't make sense of the information that's coming up, these practices that you want to do, this little thing that you believe in, or, you know, whatever, don't worry about whether this agrees with it or not. As if this does, then do it, then trust it, because that's what will feed how we create our societies for the future. That will be more family centered, not industry centered, and then therefore be a lot more enjoyable for our future generations, and enjoying the art of just the success of being, not just succeeding.
Yeah,
I really appreciate that, because I just feel like so often I'm just like an average white person from Australia, and my history is like goes back to, I don't know, I don't even know much about it. Convicts that came here probably from stealing a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I have that connection to kind of anywhere. I love my country and I love the history, the older history, not the newer history of Australia. But yeah, it's nice to have that feeling of being connected to the earth, and somewhere I've got some kind of connection history. So it's just nice to think about it like that, because I never really felt like I don't have that deep rooted feeling of belonging, really. So yeah, it's nice to think about it like that.
Yeah, well, you know, Britain had their own First Nations peoples, and so think about, you know, your spirituality now and where that must come from. Medicine woman.
Yeah. I only know because I did a DNA test of a couple of countries that I came from.
Okay.
We all come from somewhere, and I feel like we're all connected, we're all one.
Yeah.
We all come from the earth, whatever part of it's irrelevant. We all come from the dirt and the stars. So
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting perspective that we haven't had in Australia, or it hasn't been clear in Australia, because I think herein lies some of the perhaps misunderstanding and confusion in what even things like reconciliation. I'm not going to turn this into a political podcast, because I don't know anything. And I'm the first to say I don't know anything or what I'm talking about.
Okay.
But you know, if an Indigenous person came to me and said, you know, I'm a Boonwurrung man from the Kulin Nation, you know, that we're on here, and I'd be like, okay, great. And then he'd be looking at me to say who I am and where I'm from. It's like, my name's Michael. I'm an Aussie. I grew up in I grew up in Dandenong. What are you talking about? You know, so the connection that is there is deep of the people and who they're from, and that's hundreds of thousands of years. And the majority of, let's say, white Australian, if I can say that,
I already did.
The majority of white Australian will be like, you know, where are you from? It's like, I don't know, I'm an Aussie. Like most people, most whites
do we
would
sound?
say, I don't know, I'm an Aussie, because they'd say, oh, you're English. And it's like, I have no connection to England whatsoever. I don't know
Scottish,
anyone
Irish,
in England.
Welsh.
I don't, do you know what I mean? Like,
We don't know
I
any
was born
history.
here, my grandparents were here.
Yeah.
So it's really that ending needs to happen, where this is great, where it's going, find out and then trust where you are as a person. And everyone's welcome here. It's just connecting with like who that is. And so like, you're on this nation, this is, you know, where we're from, like, where are you from? It's a very different perspective to kind of white man versus Indigenous Australian. A very, very different perspective, because it's like, no, this is us, this is where we're from. And if everyone's able to trust that, and you may not know that, but trust that it's from somewhere, all of a sudden you're on the same, and it's this or it's that. And I think that's the confusion in perspective.
Sorry to cut you off. I'm sorry. I swear I wouldn't do it, but I didn't.
There eventually.
I almost to the end, and I only did it once. I feel bad of myself.
Okay.
It's really critical. I really, really do. I think once you have that connection to somewhat of your own roots, I think having that identity will strengthen your ability to then empathize and connect with the identity of the First Nations peoples here. I really feel like even just recognizing, how your family got here, and then what that means, like what you said, Xavier, you know, even just making that connection, I think is an important step in being able to do that. Because I think
it's a start, but what you're talking about, everything you're talking about is the heart, right? So like that's a start. You could go on Ancestry or whatever, but now you're going, what do I feel in my heart? You know, like who like the people that I'm from and coming here. It's like a real understanding of where you are.
Yeah.
And who you are. Even if you don't know exactly, it's that feeling in the heart, and then you're on the same level. It's interesting. It's not even competing, it's just sharing of culture rather than who's right and who's wrong. It's weird. It's not even a who's right or who's wrong. It's like it's just sharing of culture, right?
I feel more connected to the earth, the country that I was born in, that I live in, and the history there, than finding out about my heritage and where I came from. Like, does that matter from your perspective?
I always say, like with the little ones, I suppose it kind of sings to what you're saying in a sense. And it kind of sings to what you're doing as well already, Hun, in terms of your role as being, you know, a healer, spiritual healer. You know, that is your identity now, and that has become your identity. And whether you're conscious of where that comes from or not is kind of irrelevant now. And maybe that's why you're able to be comfortably here.
Yeah.
That is your connection, but you just haven't worded it, you know what I mean, the same. And so you've found your peace in who and what you are, and you would know that you got that from somewhere, right? Like that's
I think think of it more as like the spiritual connection and the of the soul rather than the bloodline, for example. But for others, the bloodline part's really important, and it's part of who they are, and they've got to healing the generational stuff as well. So it depends. Yeah, just go with the flow of what you feel in here is important to you. Like,
and listen, it is, you know, if they start to, I always say too, that because us parents might not remember or want to, if they start their own little ways of being or their own little new, like I call neurodiversity now a culture. It's not just a medical diagnosis. How we are, believe it, and how we do things. Let's also make it a culture. Like, let's change perspectives. And same for our little ones. If they start their own little ways of being, their own little rituals and their own songs and their own dances and their own ways that they want to take care of the earth and their own ideas for create or whatever it might be, let them create a new culture then for themselves. You know, as long as it's aligned with this and that.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to then join the dots if we don't have to. I believe that it's kind of like, it's same but different.
I think it's impossible to, if you're operating from the heart, you can't disrespect someone else because you're on the same heart level. And I think sometimes people get confused and they spend a lot of time in the head, and that's where they're insulting other people or other cultures. And it's understanding and listening, and not just listening with your ears, but actually spending time to listen to the subtlety of what's coming across. And I think, at least in Australia, it's wonderful how much we've got the Doug Nicholls rounds and the Indigenous welcomes to country and presentations at the start of the football games. Like, everyone on the ground is quiet and they feel something. They go, oh, I don't know what that was, but I felt something. It's about that understanding and respect on another level.
Yeah, and connection.
And I think if it comes from the heart, then you can't insult people. So we need to spend more time in the heart, right? Particularly around these things.
Yeah.
That's right.
So much to learn.
Yeah.
So much to learn. I love it.
That's what I love about the neurodivergent kitties. It's all about heart.
Can you please, for the people in the back and people like me, I don't know the difference between diverse and divergent. Can you give us a quick explanation of that before we wrap up? Because some people might be going, what is the difference? Like I am in my head. Can you please tell me?
And everybody will have a different one.
So
but this is the right one.
Yes.
Neurodiversity just allows us to cover, because we no longer say, you know, Well, and many will autism, ADHD. You know,
Asperger's.
I don't like ADHD because I don't like the word disorder or deficit. That's very disempowering and very insulting. Not meant to be. Sometimes I still say it because it's just what you get used to. But when you break it down the words, you just go, "Oh, that's really inappropriate." Actually. So it's just trying to understand, and we're also understanding now, like the spectrum is not that, it's this, and then it's like this. So it's not as easy just to say, autism. I think that there are multi neurotypes now that are also brilliant and unique and vibrant, that it's not so easy just to say autism. Well, I don't think Asperger's gets used at all anymore.
It's not a nice thing to say.
Yeah. No. And ADHD, it's not that simple. It is a galaxy. And so when we say, so you think about the word diversity, it allows us to be different. It celebrates differences.
Beautiful, yeah.
So it is the whole Milky Way.
Well put. I love it.
Thank you for clarifying, because I know I didn't know the right terminology because one of our kids has Asperger's, but then now it's meant to say they're on the spectrum or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the spectrum just came out. It's so funny. I remember
that's a new thing too.
Youth work. We were working on it many years ago, and working with young people, and it was the only thing existed was autism, and it was like, well, this person isn't like
There's
autism. That one's more like, it was really weird, and there's like,
they're not autism. That's a great
scale, and there's a spectrum, which literally the spectrum means we have no idea, and everyone's so different. The spectrum, that's like saying galaxy. Except it's like a negative way of saying, galaxy, like the way you said it. So it's like, okay, how about we just stop putting terms if we've now got a term to say that all terms fit within this term? That's negated the use of a term. So maybe we've got to look at it differently. It's hilarious. So when spectrum came out, it's like they've just admitted that you can't.
They don't know what.
Label.
Yeah. I hear the term neurospicy a lot these days too. Do you like that one, Rachel? I think people refer to themselves as I'm just neurospicy or spicy.
Nice. Neuro. Oh no, I'll think of one. I'll get back to you. I want Rob. Anything could come out of this mouth, so I won't.
This is why I push record, and you trust me as to what I present. It's wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for all of your insights. We're going to have you back on to talk a little bit more about some of the wisdom that's come from some of these kids, because I'm sure people are like,
some more examples.
What else have the kids said?
Take notes.
We could all learn from a lot of this. So perhaps we'll get you back on, and maybe you can have a few more stories and information, because I'd love to hear some more about your findings in the field.
Yes.
Love to share. Absolutely. I think the more we talk about this, it means the more that we get to celebrate it, and it means the more that we change our perspectives and languages, and the more we then unite.
Yeah. And selfishly, the more that we can learn from a higher or a deeper, more ancient wisdom that's always been there. So all of that, I think, is awesome. So thank you so much for coming on.
And thank you for the work you do, Rachel, and for stepping into your power as well. And I love saying this, because we don't get acknowledged enough for the work that we do. We're listening to your calling and being brave enough to go and be there and wave your arms around and say, I'm here to help, come and see me if you need it. So well done on just doing what you do.
Oh, thank you so much, lovely. That's beautiful. And thank you both for having me on, and like I said, for wanting this. I really appreciate it. I really value it. So thank you so much for being so amazing and asking me.
That's it for another episode, but that doesn't have to be the end of the conversation.
Feel free to leave your comments on our YouTube channel, or for those podcast listeners, you can email us at mickandthepsychic@gmail.com to leave your feedback or questions.
I'm a certified hypnotherapist and timeline regression therapist. If you wish to contact me to explore the source of an issue you're facing, just book a session at hearnhypnosis.com.au and include the promo code MATP for 10% off. You can contact me on Insta and Facebook at hearnhypnosis.
Check out my website at optimisticxavier.com.au if you feel you'd like to connect with me as a psychic medium, spiritual mentor, or intuitive coach. Include the promo code MATP for 10% discount. You can also find me on Insta, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
We look forward to connecting with you again next time as we attempt to leave no stone unturned.
Bye.
All right, cool. I reckon that should be okay.